Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me for my presentation on the role of IT and how it's driving innovation outcomes for tech buyers. What I'd like to do today is kind of walk you through the impact of digital transformation, especially in conjunction with the pandemic, how IT leadership has to change in order to uh, meet the requirements of this new reality, and how that change is going to shape technology markets for you going forward. Then I'll leave you with some essential guidance that's sort of calibrated to what we're advising those tech buyers to do. So let's talk about digital transformation. It's it was talked about quite a bit through the pandemic. If you saw Satya at Microsoft, the CEO of Microsoft, talking about companies doing 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. That was certainly true. It certainly shows in the data. What you're looking at on this slide is maturity data pre-pandemic and maturity data post-pandemic. And you can see post-pandemic, more than half of the companies have now moved into level 4 or level 5. So validates what we were talking about, but not particularly surprising to anyone listening to this presentation because we heard a lot of this. But what was surprising to us in the survey data was when we asked prior to the pandemic, there was this real correlation between companies that were digitally mature and those that were driving towards a single digital platform. It was almost one-to-one. What's happened through the pandemic, though, as you can see in this slide, most organizations have these connected islands that try to connect the different use case projects they have going on for digital transformation. So this is really significant because while we saw this accelerated investment in digital, we have organizations that are left with a lot of technical debt and a lot of work in front of them as to in terms of how they're going to sort that out. And this is going to be a major factor shaping the investment patterns in the market, is this sort of catching the IT infrastructure up to the digital progress that's been made. And it will really separate the winners from the losers in terms of your customers, those that are able to unify and get rid of that technical debt will be a major factor. The other element that's been going on before the pandemic as well is the increasing influence of the line of business buyer. So your traditional customer, I'm assuming for most of you, is the CIO in the office of the CIO. But what we've seen is the HR executive going out and just buying something like Workday for HR, or for a long time now, the sales executive going out and subscribing to Salesforce. So these decisions are being made outside the control of the CIO. And you can see from this graph, and this year will cross over where more tech investment is influenced by the line of business than the CIO itself. And this adds to the technical debt problem I just talked about, because we've always had shadow IT, but this is sort of what I call shallow IT, where it's really not hidden from anyone in the organization, but the sales executive choosing Salesforce doesn't have a lot of consideration for the cloud infrastructure it runs on, neither does the HR executive. So you can see by this picture the old idiom, a bull in a china shop. So these line of business are bulls in the IT infrastructure china shop. And so the CIO no longer has control over, it was back in the day, pre-cloud, the CIO chose the hardware that was in the data center. They chose the application portfolio. They managed the projects to connect to their supply chains and their ecosystems. But today it's hybrid or multi-cloud. It's multiple applications because of this line of business buyer. And companies are being asked to participate in all kinds of different industry ecosystems. So you see this issue mushrooming in terms of technical debt, and the CIO isn't going to regain control, is going to be able to go back to the way they used to do it. But in our minds, they're a very critical pivot point for buying decisions going forward. And they're trying to rethink how they're approaching the IT organization. In fact, according to our survey, 97% are at least considering rethinking how IT is organized and structured, at least somewhat important. And then almost 2/3, in fact, 2/3 say it's very important or the most important thing they have to do. So what you have in a market is this CIO sort of understanding that for the good of the organization, they have to deliver value, but the existing IT organizations aren't suited to what is needed most at the company. So as a technology vendor, it becomes hugely important to help the CIO go out to the line of business, have those conversations, talk about how you remove technical debt, talk about how you optimize cloud performance, talk about how you best deploy containers and robotic process automation. So you've always been a trusted advisor to the CIO, but it's doubly important going forward, and the markets are quite robust. So what's the goal? Is it, we've invested in ERP and CRM and all kinds of 3-letter acronym software products. We've moved to the cloud, but really, I talked about digital transformation at the outset, and we've been covering digital transformation for about 7 years now, maybe even a little bit more, about 7 years. And initially, our definition was the transformation of decision-making, because we felt that the data was the center of gravity for digital transformation. So it was all about the sorts of decisions you make. And that's going to be the goal, the outcome goal for the CIO. What I'm showing you on this slide is data from our Future of Intelligence research work. And it's a little bit, you need a little bit to unpack the graphic I'm showing you, but it's 3 different areas of improvement. How did they improve their knowledge use? How did they improve their work efficiency? And how did they improve their decision-making? Along the bottom, the x-axis, if you will, is the relative maturity of the sample set that we had. And then the color stacks go from minimal improvements to major improvements. So for each one of these 3 benefit categories, you can see when they move from good to excellent, and kind of think of it as, you have your own personal IQ, your intelligence quotient. This is a measure of the enterprise IQ, and those with high IQs really get the benefits. You can see how much they jump when you're just moving from good to excellent, how much the benefit increases. So again, it becomes important whether you're a security company helping them protect the data, whether you're a security company or hardware company trying to efficiently store and move the data, or whether you're a software company or a service company, helping the CIO engage with that line of business around improving the efficacy of their decision-making is going to be a huge, huge value proposition for tech vendors going forward. So let's come back. So we've sort of set the stage now. We've got this really fast advancing digital transformation led by the line of business. CIOs rethinking their organization. They really need to reorient to this concept of delivering outcomes to the organization around better decision making and intelligence. So what are they going to do? Like I said earlier, they're not going to take back the data center and choose the hardware that goes into it. They're not going to take back the application portfolio from the SaaS portfolio that the company's running. So what they really are looking to do, at least in our conversations with tech buyers, is this concept of a control plane. So I talked about hybrid cloud or multi-cloud. Well, I need architectural layer that sits over that helps me make sure my infrastructure is secure. I want to optimize the performance. I need to provide flexibility. If I have surge requirements on compute, I need a certain amount of elastic available to me, and I need to build IT resilience. I need system management that is autonomous, that can self-correct. So those, if you feel like your market is at that workload control plane that sits over the multi-cloud, then think about delivering those sorts of things. The hybrid portfolio or multi-portfolio is all these applications running. Again, having a layer, I showed you where the preponderance of digital companies have these islands of investment that are loosely connected and federated. That needs to be more consolidated. So anything you can do, robotic process automation, low code, no code, those are going to be, even if they're not separate applications, they're going to be important capabilities, especially if you're a software provider or a services provider. You need to drive those economies of intelligence, we call it. That's that intelligence, company IQ that I showed you before. And then, so maybe it's a bit more in the future, but we also see this, a lot of discussion and need around ecosystem control plane. So I'm being asked to partner in this ecosystem. I'm talking about a tech buyer now. I'm being asked to partner in this ecosystem. I need to come together with somebody that's outside my normal industry. How do I get more efficient at connecting and managing and provisioning those ecosystems that an automotive company or a healthcare company or a government wants to participate in? That's the third control plane. And that's going to be a very lucrative market as well, a little bit less mature than the other two right now. So let's break it down. I wanted to show you a little bit of software, hardware services, software infrastructure services, perhaps. And I just, there was a famous quote by Mark Andreessen 15 years ago where he said, software is going to eat the world. And apparently he was onto something, because you can see from our forecast, each forecast over the last 2 years, software spending has been at a multiple of overall IT spending over 2 times. So software is really driving the tech investment. And this could be things like infrastructure, software defined infrastructure, things like that. But it's really software at the heart. But at the same time, if you think about markets and you think about the traditional 4 Ps, product, price, place, promotion, those are all changing. Software products are becoming much more modular and much more microservice based. Pricing is moving to outcomes from sort of subscriptions, even now today, more towards outcomes. We've gone from a one-to-one sales model in software where I call on the customer, they sign a set of licenses. We've moved to one-to-many where now I deliver via SaaS, multi-tenant, single code, but multiple clients. And we're going to move to a many-to-many model where it's about marketplaces. So if you're a software company, you should be in somebody's ecosystem and have your own ecosystem so that you can maximize the value for your customers. And then promotion, we think about that as the value propositions. That's really going to change, and it's going to be very outcome based. It's not going to be, I automate this accounts payable process. It's going to be about, I'm going to get you better cash management outcomes. So you got to think about that in your messaging as part of that 4P. So that's software. And you can see here's sort of a historic perspective of that, the one-to-one to one-to-many to many-to-many. And I'm not going to read this slide to you, but just to give you a picture of what I just talked about on the previous slide. So let's talk about infrastructure and hardware around those control planes. If you look at the bottom set of bullets, we think that it's going from speeds and feeds, what's the compute cycle, to really about that automation I talked about, security and trust being a thread all through the control planes, that ability to do self-healing, automated system management, automated infrastructure, and even some application specific processing. We're going to see more and more of that, where there are back down to the semiconductor specific chips for specific jobs or even specific applications. That's going to start to happen, and that demand is going to pick up. In the enterprise control plane side, for hardware vendors, infrastructure as a service vendors, it goes from certification, I'm certified to run SAP, to optimization. No, I have specific capabilities, telemetry that helps SAP monitor consumption and optimize what you're doing. And so it's the vendor ecosystems that you're in, obviously very important, and the set of platform services you have available. And then as an infrastructure provider, can you move folks from just simply sort of connectivity to facilitating the sharing? There's going to be shared apps, shared processes, shared data in these new ecosystems. And so how do you support that as a hardware provider? And then on the services side, a whole new set of opportunities. On the workload side, it's moving away from the concept of just sort of outsourcing my mess for less. I'm going to rebadge my people to the outsourcing vendors people. And it's going to be more about that automation notion again. It's going to be, can you help them with cloud economics? Can you help them with sourcing? Can I spot buy elastic compute? What are the models I'm using to do that? And then this emergence of industry clouds. How can you help people understand which industry clouds are good for what purposes, and how can you help them run their activities on those industry clouds? At the enterprise control plane level, a lot of demand now for good data semantics. If it's all being driven by intelligence, I have to understand how data relates to each other. I'm not talking about sort of data definitions. I'm talking about this relates to this. I have to have the semantics, or I can't do inference, and I can't drive intelligence. Just like there's system autonomy, there's also process autonomy. Can I help customers put in RPA and just generally improve the decision efficacy? And then on the ecosystem side, I think service firms need to think of themselves as no longer system integrators, but ecosystem integrators, and help folks with what they're trying to do with software-based product innovation, all these new business models that are coming out by industry. And then we think long-term blockchain is going to play a big role in these new industry ecosystems. So that's probably a competency service companies want to nurture. So let me close out with some essential guidance. And like I said at the outset, I was going to use the advice we give our tech buying customers as a basis for my guidance to you. So what we tell tech buyers is to think about going from portfolios, platforms. You're no longer going to be the final decision maker on what is in the application portfolio. You have to do platforms. We have a equipment rental company that has fantastic performance, and they took this platform view of it. So you need to be able to talk about the platforms you have and your ability to connect to other platforms, maybe even more importantly. Customers are moving from projects to products. So there's this sort of concept of greenfield ongoing innovation. So you can't just close the deal, clap your hands and walk away, go to the next one. You have to really engage in deep partnerships with your customers to help them with this sort of agile, continuous delivery of tech. And I've got a great example. Toyota Financial Services. They have 32 they call them factories, but they're really software factories, and it's continuous improvement to their constituents within Toyota Financial Services. So you need to think about how you might support that with your product capabilities. We're really moving from abstracted architecture, where architecture was this thing we did in the office of the CIO in the ivory tower. Now it's embedded into the business operations. You look at somebody like Lockheed Martin, they are embedding architects into that line of business. So when the line of business is thinking about making that independent decision, it's consistent with the architecture needs. And then finally, this notion of return on investment as the basis for justification, to this concept of option value. If I invest in your technology, it's not just I'm going to invest this and get that, and this is the return. It's going to be I'm going to invest in this, and it's going to give me the option, should the market do this, should the pandemic do that, I can do this because your platform is agile and able to pivot. So that's going to be a key justification point. So thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been my pleasure.